Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gururdevo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Okay, we have been discussing Mulavidya Nirasa. Since the drum beating is going on, the noise of drum beating is disturbing. So yet I dare to speak a little bit, just a half an hour. Okay. So the Purapakshi was telling that in Sushupti, the world continues in some or other form, or at least the cause of the world, the seed of the world continues. He says, the seed of the world continues, the world doesn't go away completely, or world doesn't cease to exist. Not question of going. Going implies that it existed before and now it has gone away. Okay? Going implies that having existed before it has gone away. We are not talking of going, it ceases to exist. Ceases means it never there. Ceases means it never there. So in Sushupti, world never existed. So Sushupti is an experience you have to directly watch. So these people, instead of directly watching the deep sleep, they are trying to evaluate the nature of our own experience from another angle. See, can one experience be evaluated from another experience? Can Sushupti, which is a matter of everybody's experience, be evaluated from the experience of waking? That's not right, but that's what they are doing. Even dream also. Dream can be looked at as the dream is experienced. Dream as it is experienced. Another one is dream seen from the waking standpoint. That means you stand as a waker and look at the dream. Whatever it appears to you, you take that. This is one way. Other way is see the dream as the dream it is, as the dream is. Similarly, Sushupti. So in this 6th point passage, 5 arguments were given. 4 arguments we have discussed. The 5th one, let us say, Evam hi tatra paramarsha. That Purapakshi or Mulavidyavadi, the advocate of Mulavidya, says that Evam hi tatra paramarsha. Tatra yat satyam sa na tatra grihyate. The seed of the world called as Mulavidya, it is there very much in deep sleep, he asserts. If you assert, but you may ask, where is that? But nobody experienced. Oh, sorry, I've removed it. But nobody has seen it. Oh, nobody has seen it. In the deep sleep, say, tat yat satyam sa na tatra grihyate iti. It is true that it is not cognized then because of a want of an instrument to cognize it. For a want of a means of knowledge. Want of instrument means a means of knowledge, want of pramana. Instrument means a means of knowledge. Okay, to cognize it. See what he says is, in deep sleep there is no means of knowledge. Therefore, it is very strange. This I have already discussed. That old lady lost something in her hut. dropped from her hand. She was stitching a cloth. Her needle dropped from her hand in the hut, and she is searching for it in the outside in the street. When she was asked, why are you searching here when you dropped it inside the hut? She says, here we have got a street light, good street light, bright light I can see, but inside there is no light, how can I search? Is there any meaning in her talk? She dropped the needle in the hut, inside the hut, but searching here in the street. Similarly, regarding the deep sleep, you have to look at the deep sleep alone. But regarding the deep sleep, he says, there is no instrument in the deep sleep to cognize that there is something present. It is present there as ascertained from its recollection on waking. So, its presence, that the seed form of the world as a seed is present in deep sleep. That's what Mulavidya says. But we don't find it. Yes, we don't directly experience it or find it in deep sleep, but we find it on coming into waking. See, recollection on waking. On waking, we find its recollection in the form such as, I did not know anything in sleep. See, you have not directly experienced. You have not directly experienced. But how can you recall in the waking state? He says, it is not experienced, no doubt, in deep sleep, but you recall it in the deep sleep. Therefore, from the memory in the waking state, you infer its presence in deep sleep. It's a strange thing. Therefore, he says, it is not simply an absence of knowledge, but something positively present. He has got his own conclusion. This more will be discussed later. Nakinchid avedisham nachayam paramarashaha kevalam jnanabhava vishayakaha. This memory about waking deep sleep, this memory occurring in waking state about the deep sleep, he doesn't indicate absence of knowledge in deep sleep, but pratiyogi jnanasyapi abhavat sushuptav, because there is no pratiyogi. He says there is no pratiyogi, means which I have discussed I think in the last class. Counter entity is not present, because kincha this is also meaningless. I'll give you a simple example. Today's in the morning breakfast, I give you an example. A few hours ago, let us say 2 hours ago, you were sitting in your room, drinking coffee or eating something. That time if I ask you, did you see an elephant in front of you? How can there be elephant in your drawing room? Elephant can't enter. Or did you see a tiger in front of you? You say no. Now when I am asking you, did you see tiger in front of you in your drawing room few hours ago? You say no. Now I ask next question. Were you aware that I am not seeing tiger now at that time? At that time you did not have a thought that I am not seeing a tiger now. You didn't have this thought. But now when I am asking you, did you see a tiger before? So keeping this sentence, keeping this question in your mind, you compare with your past experience and say, no, there was no tiger. See, to say that I did not see tiger before, to say that I did not see tiger before, now you are entertaining a thought of tiger. There is a thought of tiger now, and with this thought you compare with your past experience and say that no, there is no thought of tiger. This is simple. This is as simple as this. Similarly, In the waking state, you see this world, you and the world, and this duality is there. When I am asking you, did you experience this world like this in deep sleep? You say no. That's all. So taking this waking world as a reference, see its contrast in deep sleep, that it did not exist. There was no world at all. So the Pratiyogi, a counter entity, whose absence you are thinking of in deep sleep, is there in waking state only. So by comparing with waking state, you are telling it was not there. But in deep sleep itself, you didn't have a thought that I am not seeing anything, I am seeing a blank. There was no there was a thought neither of a blank nor nothing. In fact, you didn't have any thought at all. You didn't have any thought. And these people say, you had a thought. You had a thought in deep sleep. This is the whole difference of Mulavidya and us, is only this. In deep sleep, there was a thought that I don't know anything. We say that you didn't have any thought. Even I don't know anything thought also you didn't have. There was no thought whatsoever. This is as simple as this. I didn't know anything, you didn't have any thought at all. Now, after coming into waking state, comparing with this world, when asked, did you see anything in deep sleep? Comparing with these things, you say, no, there was nothing. So taking this world as a contrast, you negate this world and say that there is nothing. Even to say nothing, you have to negate something. By negating this world, you say something. You say nothing. Nothing means you imagine something and negate it. So something has to be negated. But in deep sleep, there was no thought of even negation. In deep sleep itself, when you were in deep sleep, you didn't have even a thought of negation. To entertain a thought of negation, you need a contrast of some thought, some positive thought. That you have in waking state. Okay, you have a positive thought in waking state, and this thought you negate looking at deep sleep. Now only, after coming into waking, you compare with it and say, oh, there was nothing. But in deep sleep itself, you didn't have a thought that I am not seeing anything, everything is blank, there is nothing. Nobody has any thought. This is simple. But this I am directly explaining now, but the Purvapakshi takes it differently. And he says, moreover, I recall the ignorance of myself. He says, there was a blank, I did not know anything, was my experience I am recalling. Strange thing. He says, now when you are entertaining a thought about deep sleep, that I did not know anything, is a recollection of your real experience of not knowing anything. See, what a strange explanation. What a strange explanation. Now here in waking state, from the waking state, you are talking about deep sleep, that I didn't know anything. Okay, you did not know anything is right. But did you have a thought in deep sleep that I don't know anything now? Nobody has. Nobody has such a thought, nor is it possible to have a thought. But why do you infer the experience? Why do you say that you are recollecting, you are recalling the past experience? Past was no experience, how can you recall? Past, there was no experience in deep sleep, experience of a thought. You didn't entertain any thought, how can you recall? So this waking reference about the deep sleep. So the waking mind has a thought about the deep sleep, it is a reference to deep sleep, is a purely imposition from the waking, a contrast from the waking. It is not an actual experience of nothingness in deep sleep. Okay? It's not an actual experience of nothingness in deep sleep. Nobody has experienced it, nor it is possible. From the waking standpoint, you are contrasting and saying that no, it was not there. You saw yesterday 3 people in front of you in your drawing room. You're talking to them.
I asked them, was there a fourth person? No. You instantly say no. There was only three. But did you have a thought that there is only three and there is no fourth? You are not thinking of a fourth. You are only three. You are talking. That's enough. Now when I ask you, you compare and say, no, there was no next, there was no another person. There was only three. But the fourth, there was no thought at all. Only when I ask the question, you compare and tell me. Otherwise, no. Similarly, but Purvapakshi has a very different view. That means he is speculating about deep sleep rather than directly looking at the sleep. Directly take the deep sleep. Instead of taking the deep sleep experience directly, he is speculating, he is interpreting, he is explaining logically from the waking standpoint. This logical explanation, interpreting, developing a theory, making a theory or a hypothesis is what we are criticizing. You are making a theory of it. You are giving an interpretation to it. That interpretation is built up from the waking standpoint. Interpretation, explanation is manufactured, is built up, is cooked up, is made up from the waking standpoint. Is cooked up, is made up from the waking standpoint, but you just look at the state directly look at the deep sleep. There is nothing to see. You alone, all alone are there. This is what we say. Okay, so moreover, I recall the ignorance of myself too in the form such as I did not know. Now Purvapakshi says, not only there is a blank about the world, not only there is no knowledge about the world. See, he is adding one more. Not only there is no knowledge about the world, there is no knowledge about myself also. Means there is no knowledge about my presence also. I am present. Even that thought I didn't have. I did not know even myself. Neither I knew the world nor I knew myself. And no knowledge of even myself. Okay. And this Mamapyaham Najnatavaniti Atma Vishayakasya Jnanasya Paramarshosti, you are referring to yourself also, that I did not know myself. He says Tatra, and this is, therefore, although there is this incidental, not natural, absence of any knowledge, including myself, a knowledge of anything, knowledge of even myself, knowledge of even myself. I have no knowledge of even myself. And this one refers to not an absence of knowledge, but something positive ignorance. How? Which is by its very nature opposite to knowledge. Now he says, it is not absence of knowledge, but it is something positive entity. And it is a positive substance that is a waking world alone in a very, rudimentary form, in a seed form, in a compressed seed form, small form, an abstract or contracted form at that time. This is what Purvapakshi says, but it is unacceptable. It is also a kind of a veil, he says. It is also a kind of an avarana. Okay? A kind of an avarana. Avarana means a veil, a covering. For that he gives 2 or 3 arguments. One is, firstly, because there is no other reason for not knowing the very self-shining Atman. He says, how can there be not knowing yourself? See the point. How can there be not knowing myself? See what he talks. How can there be not knowing yourself when the Atma is self-shining? This is the argument to all the scholars of even my own, in my personal meeting with many scholars, Mulavidya Vadins, all the acharyas talk of this argument. In deep sleep, Atma is self-shining. Atma is throughout self-shining. When Atma is self-shining, how can there be absence of knowledge? The simple thing they are missing is, by knowledge we mean a thought. By knowledge we mean a thought. See, the self-shiningness is not a matter of thought at all. The self-shining Atma doesn't entertain a thought. So where is the question of thought? And they say, in Sushupti, I did not know anything is not an absence of knowledge, because absence of knowledge is not possible. Not knowing in deep sleep, not knowing is not possible in deep sleep, he says. Not knowing the self-shining Atman is not possible, because Atma is always shining. How can you say, how can you be not knowing? How can you be not knowing when the Atma is self-shining? See, self-shining Atma doesn't entertain any thought of either knowing or not knowing. Self-shining itself means it is independent of thought. What do they mean by self-shining? Swayam Prakasha, Swayam Jyoti means Swayam Prakasha is beyond a thought. Okay. Swayam Prakasha is beyond a thought, neither knowing, not knowing, no thought. So when we say absence, and he says, how can we have an absence of knowledge when Atma is self-shining? It's ridiculous. We say that there is no thought at all, neither of shining, nor of non-shining. There is no thought at all, and we say. And he says, in Sushupti, there cannot be an absence of knowledge when the Atma is self-shining. Therefore, something positive must be accepted. Oh, is unnecessarily imposing, imagining much more into deep sleep. So anyway, this will be discussed by Siddhanti later, and he will refute all those things in detail. So first he says this one. Then the next argument. Misunderstanding, next argument is Viparita Grahana Rupa Mithyagnanasya Sushuptau Abhavat. Now, the misunderstanding. Ajnanam is of three types: not knowing, misunderstanding, and doubt. And he says, not knowing is not possible because Atma is self-shining. Then misunderstanding is also not possible. Viparita Grahana Rupa Mithyagnanasya Sushuptau Abhavat. So the misunderstanding is a vritti. Since there is no vritti in deep sleep, that misunderstanding vritti cannot exist. Therefore, that I did not know anything is not a Viparita Jnana, it is not a misunderstanding. Okay, next. Kevala Mithya Jnana Samskaranam Tattva Jnana Pratibandhaka Samarthya Abhavacha. Next point you see. Now, he is imagining, all these arguments are from Panchapadika Vivarana. Swamiji is taking verbatim this Panchapadika Vivarana argument. Only he has not stated whose argument it is, but I have noted down, it is the purely Panchapadika Vivarana's argument. All these statements as they are. Kevala Mithya Jnana Samskaranam. He says, the samskara, impressions of misunderstanding, misconception. The samskara of Viparita Jnana, Mithya Jnana, doesn't exist in deep sleep, he says. Tattva Jnana Pratibandhaka Samarthya Abhavacha. Ayyo Rama. In Sushupti, you are unable to know Atman, though Atma is self-shining. So what prevents you? What prevents you from not knowing the self-shining Atma? Mithya Jnana, wrong knowledge, doesn't exist. So the samskaras of wrong knowledge do exist, but they can't stop you from knowing yourself. See, what a prakriya. There is a samskara of mithya jnana. Mithya jnana has ever a samskara? See, tatvajnana pratibandhaka samarthya bhavacha jnana virodhi bhutam bhava rupam sukshmavastapannam kinchidavaranam. Therefore, you must accept that there is an ajnana which is a positive, which is an avaranam. Avaranam means it covers. Sukshmavastapannam, it has assumed a very abstract state, very contracted or compressed abstract state which has assumed. And is jnana virodhi, it can go away with jnanam. But it is there in deep sleep. But if it is there in deep sleep, how can you remove it? Because there is no possibility of gaining jnanam. So like this, there are many defects. One first defect is they are speculating, they are interpreting, not looking at the anubhava as it is. You just directly look at the deep sleep anubhava, you are just yourself. There is nothing other than you. That's why we call it Brahman, non-dual Brahman. So, sukshmavastha apannam kinchit avaranam vidyate iti avashyam abhipetavyam bhavati. Okay. Now this argument is over. I think we will proceed to the seventh passage. I think I am tired, so we will discuss it in the next class. A short class, it is of 25 minutes. So, okay, jagaritepi pratyaksham anubhuyate sthulavastha apannam bhavajnanam. And he says the same bhavarupa ajnana, positive ignorance which existed in deep sleep, same thing is experienced in waking state also, he says. Very strange person. The same positive ignorance is immediately experienced as a concrete form in waking state, he says. In a abstract form, you experience in deep sleep, and the same bhavarupa avidya in a concrete form in waking state. Neither in waking nor in dream. It is a matter of experience. They are only interpreting, imposing all these things. Okay, so this seventh point argument we will discuss in the next class tomorrow. Okay, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om Tat Sat.